And welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I am Michael DeLon. Today I am here with Luke Homen. Luke, man, thanks for taking some time to be with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're welcome. This is going to be a fun interview. Luke is a client of ours, but he's also he's a bankruptcy attorney in Oklahoma. He's the founder of Convenient Bankruptcy, the host of what All About Bankruptcy podcast, and he's the author of Choosing Bankruptcy: How to Protect Your Family Without Losing Your Future. So, guess what we're talking about today is bankruptcy, because I think, Luke, people have a lot of misinformation, bad thoughts, and I want you to clarify this for us. So, as we dive into this, tell me, how in the world did you get doing what you're doing today?
Well, it's always funny, right? Bankruptcy is one of those practice areas where I like to say it's not a sexy practice area, right? People don't go to law school thinking, I'm going to be a bankruptcy attorney. They go be like, I'm going to go defend criminals, or I'm going to fight for the Constitution, or, something like
Yep.
that. Um, but the reality is, when you're practicing law, you still need to find a job. And
That
so
does help.
So I moved cross country a couple times, and after my wife and I moved to Oklahoma, I just kind of like blasted out 120 resumes. I'd already been practicing law for a couple of years at that point. I had no idea what a bankruptcy was or how any of it worked.
Yeah.
Um, but I was able to immediately use my California law license to practice in federal court. And so the guy interviewing me said, "Hey, you could be a bankruptcy attorney right now and I can hire you." And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about bankruptcy." He's like, "Not a problem. You can get sworn in like today and start
Yeah.
doing this." So over the course of like 6 or 8 months, I eventually got my Oklahoma license to practice in Oklahoma State Court. But right away, I was able to start doing this practice area I knew nothing about, which it turned out was amazing and I learned to love. But yeah, it's job law.
Yeah.
They offer you a job and you practice that area of law.
That's right. I love it. Job law. But what a great story though, because you took something and said, well, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And figure it out you have. So
Mhm.
what I want to do in our time today is really just kind of walk through some of the chapters in your book, but really help our audience understand. And let's just jump into it, man.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the basics of bankruptcy, kind of what is it, and maybe a couple stories of people that we wouldn't really recognize or remember that actually went through bankruptcies, because it's not the end of the
Yeah.
world. So what are some of the basics?
All right. So here's the basics, which is you are somebody. Now, I generally represent people, not businesses, but this
Okay.
could be a person or a business. You are an individual or a business that's struggling with debt. And when you're struggling with debt, you reach out and you say, "Hey, is there a legal option that can help me manage these debts?" And so we have different chapters of bankruptcy. Some work for businesses, most work for people, that allow you to address your debts in a different way so that we can make your debt problems not so bad.
Okay. And that's, boy, what a great summary. Because I was thinking the other day of, I'm a follower of Christ, and Jesus came to, free the captives from prison. And I thought, there's really, in America specifically, there's probably not a bigger prison than debt for the American
Right.
public, right?
Yeah, we think, oh, well, there's no more jail for being in debt. That was an English thing.
Right.
So you don't go to prison so much anymore, but the stress and the overwhelming and the lack of options that start surrounding you as everything starts closing in, because as your debt problems get worse, your options get narrower and worse. And now
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I like to call it kind of this spiral, this whirlpool that just gets worse and worse over time as your debt problems increase.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be that way. And that's one reason you wrote this book, Choosing Bankruptcy. And your
Right.
book, Luke, as I was walking through, you've got a number of chapters in here, which is makes the book really cool. And I know in bankruptcy there are different chapters. I think that's what you call them. So
Right.
unpack kind of the big ones, and what do we need to know about different chapters of bankruptcy?
Yeah. Well, think of the chapters of bankruptcy just like the chapters of the book. So the beginning of the bankruptcy code is the chapters on like definitions. This is what a debt is. It has a certain meaning. This is what a debtor, a trustee, a creditor, definitions.
Okay.
And then as you get in, the later chapters are the different chapters that are relief options. So those are the chapters that you file under. So the
Okay.
main chapter that most people file under is a chapter 7. That's the chapter where you get out of debt without paying your creditors.
Okay.
That's for regular everyday people. Usually it's for people who don't make as much money as compared to other people.
Right.
Um, you've also got a Chapter 13. Chapter
Okay.
13 is another option for individuals that involves a repayment of your debts. Doesn't mean that you're
Okay.
paying back all your dets, but you
Right.
can use this to save your house from foreclosure. You could use this to stop a vehicle that's going to be repossessed from you.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're a higher income person that doesn't qualify for Chapter 7, you could use the Chapter 13 to still get out of debt in a much more manageable, structured, affordable way than just dealing with the wolves all by yourself as
Yeah.
the creditors are coming after you. So
Okay.
those are the main chapters we use for individuals. There's also a chapter 11 for businesses. There's actually two forms of chapter 11. There's a chapter 12 for family fishermen and family farmers. There's a chapter for
Huh.
municipalities like Detroit. All kinds of different chapters. You just kind of flip to the right one in the book, the one that applies to you.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating because I've heard of chapter 11 or 7 and 11 and 13, but again, I'm just a common folk guy, dude. I
Right.
didn't know the differences, and to me, bankruptcy is bankruptcy is bankruptcy, and the reality is it's not, right? Let's
Right.
talk about, and you mentioned debt, but I mean, why are people filing for bankruptcy, or maybe what gets them into that situation? Is it procrastination? Is it just too much credit card? I mean, what's
Yeah.
the precipitating aspects of this?
Sure. It's always something bad that happens, right? Because
Mm,
usually people are able to manage their debts on their own until something happens that kind of it's that straw that breaks the back, right?
right.
So everybody generally tends to carry a little bit of debt. The statistic I was looking at the other day, it's something like a third of people in Oklahoma have overdue credit card debt right now. Like a third. It's a really
Wow.
high number.
Yeah.
So it's not just one or two people, it's
Yeah.
a lot of people. And that's okay, right? You're paying your credit card, you're doing all right, and then maybe your car breaks down, or you have a job loss, or you have a medical event, or a really big one is you have a family change, you have a divorce, you have a marriage, you have some sort of major life events where now all of a sudden you realize this is too much.
Yeah.
Now, the other big thing that's happening that drives people into bankruptcy is creditor activities. So you've got a certain amount of debt out there, but at some
Hmm.
point, the creditors get tired of not getting paid. And so they start taking action. And that could mean phone calls, that could mean harassment, that could mean lawsuits or garnishment, repossessions. Creditors do things to try and collect money. And at some point, people also say, that's too much. Let me call an attorney so I have somebody to stand up for me
Right.
and give him my options and my legal rights.
Yeah, and that point many times, and I'm guessing here, so this is where that's why I'm interviewing you because I don't know. I would assume that at the very beginning of something, right? You could probably start a negotiation with the company or so and work something out maybe, but I think most people are scared to do that and we don't know, and so we don't do anything, and that
Yeah.
just compounds the problem. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah. And bankruptcy is always viewed as a last resort. And I always joke that clients don't want to be here. And I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sure that's true with every law office, right?
probably.
You don't want to be
Yeah.
talking to a criminal attorney either. Uh,
Exactly.
but nobody wants to file for bankruptcy. People always want to think, I got this. I
Yeah.
could do it. If I just work an extra shift, if I just take a second job, I could do this. And at some point, you can't, right?
Right.
It's that continuum of, I could do it, I could do it just barely. And then, no, you're
Yes.
at some point, you get to that moment where you say, this is more than I can manage.
Yeah.
And bankruptcy doesn't have some sort of minimum amount of debt. It's not like, oh,
Hmm.
I've got X, now it's bankruptcy time. It's more just, this is too much for me. And
Right.
that is when it's time to start looking at bankruptcy.
Yeah, that's really good. I had this vision of pushing a big snowball up a mountain, and you're like, yeah, I can. No, I can't.
Yeah.
Right, and
At
you
some
just
point,
have
your
to.
muscles give out
Yeah,
and you got to get out of the way and not just be
yeah,
rolled over.
absolutely. Well, speaking of getting rolled over, there's a big contingent of people who not only have credit card debt, but they have student loan debt,
Yeah.
and that's a massive area. Talk a little bit about that and some
Yeah.
options that are available.
That's one of those things that's changed a lot in our country over the last 50, 60 years.
Hmm.
I don't know your age. I see you've got some gray hair.
I do.
But
Yeah,
probably when you were a kid or your parents' generation, you could go to school and work at McDonald's and use your McDonald's income to pay for your tuition
yeah,
and graduate debt free, right? And
that's right.
that's not how the world works anymore. Nowadays, McDonald's still pays very little, but going to school can cost $30 or $40,000 even in a public school. You
Right.
multiply that by 4 years, you add in some cost of living, and even if the student is working to make those costs smaller, you're going to graduate with a lot of debt.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works out. You get a job on Wall Street, you become a doctor. This is great. You can pay all the loans back. But a lot of people don't. Maybe they don't graduate college, or maybe they got a degree in basket weaving and there's
Right.
not a job market for that. And so they find themselves with a tremendous amount of student loan debt, and they didn't get an income level that will allow them to meaningfully pay those debts back. And
Yeah.
that's one of those big shifts that's happened in our society over the last 50 years is college gets more and more expensive every year. And the amount of debt you need in order to get a college degree is more expensive.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't get a college degree and you're just working at a gas station, that's not really a great career path either. So
That's
it's
right.
not like I'm telling people not to go to college, but there's going to be a number of people that are going to graduate college or not graduate because it was too
Hmm.
hard and it wasn't the right fit. And now all of a sudden they're out in the real world with a tremendous amount of student loan debt and
Hmm.
no ability to deal with it.
Right.
So I'll try and keep this short. There's so much backstory here. It used to be the student loans were dischargeable 50 years ago. And
Okay.
then they passed a law that says, okay, you can't discharge your student loans until at least 5 or 7 years after you go to college. And then they started passing laws in 2005. They made this a lot harder that just says, okay, now student loans are non dischargeable as a general concept.
Okay.
Well, what happened next? All the student loan companies said, let's just loan lots more money to 18-year-olds who don't
Yeah.
who don't know what they're doing. Um, so the amount of debt that we got as a country and as individuals skyrocketed
Yes.
because all these 18-year-olds were allowed to incur tremendous amounts of debt that now Congress says you can't easily get rid of. But
Hmm.
there's a difference between easily get rid of and discharge at all. And so, what we're doing right now is we are focusing on finding the right people and filing special cases inside their bankruptcy to get their student loans discharged.
Oh,
It's
very cool.
complicated. There's a whole process. There's a chapter in the book on it.
Yeah.
But so far, we've discharged about $800,000 of student loan debt for our clients.
That's
No,
awesome.
it's got to be the right clients. This is
Right.
not every American gets $800,000. This
Right.
is we look at your case, we look at, hey, you tried to repay these, you tried to get a good job. We look at all these things, and then we say on a case by case basis, all right, let's look at you. And let's say, let's present your case to the judge and say, this is somebody who needs student loan relief.
Yes.
So it's something that we're looking at, and we're doing about 15 or 20 of them a year. So
That's good.
a
Yeah.
good number. Hopefully, we'll do more next year. It just, we're building on this.
Well, and it always takes time because it not only takes time to find the right people, but it takes time for the word to get out that it's actually a an option, and it's not an
Yeah.
option from what I'm hearing is saying, well, I'd really rather have a bigger house, so I'm going to try to get rid of my student debt because I've got a good job. I just need the bigger house. That's probably doesn't qualify for it, I'm guessing, right?
No, we're looking at people who are already filing bankruptcy,
Yeah,
where life didn't work out the way they thought it would,
yeah,
and now they have a crippling amount of student loan debt that they don't have any other options to deal with.
yeah. Yeah, and that I think that's one thing I loved when I first met you, because I mean I used to put bankruptcy into the same categories like personal injury attorneys, right? And it was like, "Ugh." And what I've learned over the years of working with a number of attorneys is y'all are good guys. You're helping people who
Yeah.
are in a bad situation, usually through no fault of their own.
Right. Yeah, that's most of our clients.
Yeah.
And occasionally, like I think of a client who actually had bipolar. And so she
Mhm.
secretly, without the knowledge of her husband, had tons of credit cards that she got on her own, and she would get manic and she would go out and buy lots and lots of things. Now, was that a good decision? No. Was it her choice? Sure. Is she also diagnosably mentally ill? Yeah, she
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Um, and so a bankruptcy was in her future. And that
Yes.
was a way that we could address this. And then she had to sit down with her husband and come up with strategies and make sure this didn't happen again. But the reality is, even in that situation where somebody bought a lot of things, it's because she had a medical problem.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about a couple more things as we start to wrap up is alternatives to bankruptcy and then
Sure.
life after bankruptcy. I think that's another
Yeah.
gray area. So let's talk about some alternatives to bankruptcy because
Okay.
it's not right for everybody, right?
Right. Okay. So option number one, you just pay back your debts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we're working with a client on bankruptcy, they inherit some money, and we say, you know what? Just pay your debts back.
Yeah.
You just inherited $80,000. This was a client last week. You just inherited $80,000. Your debts are 20,000. Just pay your debts. Just do
Yeah.
it. So getting rich, paying back your debts, always on the table for some people, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's also the option of taking out what we call a debt consolidation loan.
Oh,
And
okay.
the
Yeah.
idea there, let's say that you've got some credit cards that are charging you 23% interest or something.
Yeah.
And then you can go down to your local banker and he'll say, okay, use this money to pay off all your credit cards. I will loan you enough money so that you can pay your credit cards off. And now you owe the same amount of money, but at a lower interest rate.
Yeah.
That can be useful for some people,
Absolutely.
especially, interest rates are nasty. They rack up the amount of money you owe really fast.
Yes.
Now you still need to qualify for that loan
Right.
and you still need to have the ability to pay that loan back. So that's an option. It works occasionally. It has to be the right situation. Oftentimes, it's one of those where life was bad. I went through credit card debt. Now I've got a great job. So if I could just get ahead of this interest rate problem,
Yep.
I could deal with it. And so in that
Yeah.
case, a debt consolidation loan is a good idea. Something to be very, very careful about as a bankruptcy alternative is debt settlement. This
Mm.
is usually not a good idea. So there's companies out there, and they'll have some sort of appealing name like Green Path Peace or Green, oftentimes these companies are actually subsidized by credit card companies. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, or they're actual predators. I had a client, I reviewed their contracts. They had hired this Florida law firm, it was an actual lawyer out of Florida, and for every $100 that they put in, about $84 went to the law firm's pocket, and about $16 went into the trust account to be used to pay for their debts. Yeah, I have the
Oh my.
contract. It's a total, it's not a scam. $16 went towards the debts.
That's
But
right.
you've got to be very, very careful. But the idea behind those companies is that you don't trust yourself to hold your money and you don't trust yourself to pay your debts, but you trust that company. And so
Yeah.
you give them all your money and you say, you hold my money. And then when you've got a lot of my money, I want you to pay back my debts and negotiate them for me.
Right. Wow.
I don't recommend it
Mm-hmm.
because there's such a high chance of people getting taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Um, so those are some alternatives.
Okay.
My favorite is the get a nice inheritance and pay off all your debts because that's
That
that's great.
that's lovely.
Um, but for a lot of people, just think about bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Compare it to those alternatives. Uh, Obviously, I'm pro bankruptcy,
Well, yeah. Well, and that's why you
but
wrote the book, but we're going to tell people how to get a copy of your book because it's a great read because
yeah,
what we really want people is to be educated. And I think
right,
bankruptcy is one of those dark areas that we know what that is. And that's why I want to talk about
yeah.
this last part is
Yeah,
life
and let
after
me
bank.
just pause you right
Yeah.
there. So, and the reason for that is this information gap, where you've got these credit card companies
Yeah.
and these loan companies that are making trillions of dollars a year, so they can afford to put all this information out in the world. And then you've got bankruptcy attorneys who make very, very little money compared to other attorneys.
Yes.
And I have very little ability compared to Visa or MasterCard to educate the entire public on bankruptcy, whereas the
Right.
credit card companies can spend all the Super Bowl ads saying, pay back your debts,
Right.
give us all your money. There's
Yeah.
a disparity there in messaging ability.
There really is. And knowledge can be power. And that's one reason you wrote this book. One last thing I want to talk about is life after bankruptcy? Because I've always heard, I mean, you file bankruptcy, you're done for at least 7 years and it's on your record forever. And it's like, I mean, what are some truths behind it? I'm sure it's different,
Sure.
but
Yeah. All right. So the first thing is after you file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you've got to wait 8 years before you file another Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So on the one hand, penalty, right? You're in timeout. You can't file another bankruptcy for 8 years. But this is also an opportunity for those credit card companies to loan you money. So what really happens is the moment you file that Chapter 7 and you eliminate all those unsecured debts, you start getting letters in the mail before your bankruptcy is even done, offering you new credit cards and offering you new debts because now you are debt free and you can't file another Chapter 7 for 8 years. So you are a wonderful person to loan money to. So the
yeah.
reality is, the moment you file bankruptcy, you're not blacklisted from debt. You've got to be extra careful because
Wow.
you're going to get lots of offers to take out debt because now you're a really good target. So that's the first thing to think about. Another
Yeah.
thing to think about is people think, well, how am I going to get a car? Like I've got this awful
Yeah.
car. I need to get rid of it in the bankruptcy. We actually have a company and some lenders we're connected with where you could get a new vehicle the day after you file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And
Wow.
so here's how that normally works. You are in a car that's either broke down or not working, or most often you're somewhere in that whirlpool where the car that you're driving, you are paying 20% interest on. You've got a
Mhm.
car payment that's $900 a month. And oftentimes the best answer is give that car back in the bankruptcy, wipe out that debt, and let's get you a used car at a payment you can afford. And we can do that before your bankruptcy case is even over. So you can get new debts, you can get new cars, and people often also want to know, what about buying a house? To get a mortgage, it's a 2 or 3 year wait period, depending on which mortgages you're looking for. And
Yeah.
so what I tell people is by the time you finish your bankruptcy and you save up some money in your savings account, which now you can do because you're not paying back debts,
Right.
within 2 or 3 years, you've got your down payment and you're eligible for that house that you never would have been able to buy while you still had all this debt trap.
That's right. Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
It see
It's a good
it
life after
you
bankruptcy.
breathe hope
Yeah.
into people's lives
Right.
that they come to you probably in a very hopeless situation because they
Yeah.
don't know they're getting sucked down in that whirlpool thing
Yeah.
and
Well,
through a
that's why we've got the life preserver on the cover.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's on your website and things because you throw a preserver to people to go, I'm going to, well, as your subtitle, how to protect your family without losing your future. You have a way to
Right.
help people really maintain that future, have a much better future when they choose bankruptcy. Look, I mean, there is so much more in your book that we didn't even scratch the
Right.
surface on, which is great. That's one reason you wrote it. How do people get a copy of this? How do they find you if they're
Sure.
what's their next step?
Well, if you're watching this video and you don't need my services, but you have lots of money, you can go on Amazon and buy a copy.
There you go.
Or you can go to my website. It's convenientbankruptcy.com and you can get a free copy. We'll email you a PDF of it. And if you set a consultation with my office, we'll actually mail you a free copy in the mail.
That's awesome.
So, wealthy people who are listening, buy my book. It'll be great. I'll get some royalties.
That's right.
Everybody else, go to the website. We get you a free copy and we'll get you educated on bankruptcy so you can make a good, educated decision on your future.
I love that. And I want to really encourage those who are listening to go do that, to go buy it on Amazon. It may not apply to you, but Luke said 1 in 3 people, I think it was in Oklahoma, but that's
Yeah,
probably a good stat nationwide, right? When you're sitting in church this weekend or wherever, a Rotary, look to your left and look to your right. One of you is dealing with some stuff. So why don't you
right.
get one of these books, buy it on Amazon, read it so you have some education and you could hand it to a friend to say,
Yep.
hey, this might be helpful.
Yeah,
Walk with them through it because I can only imagine how lonely it might be if you're in that
right.
situation.
Yeah, and that's why the book is full of stories, but it's also less intimidating than having to actually talk to an attorney. You can just read
Right.
the book and then have that entry into the bankruptcy conversation at a level that's less intimidating than
Absolutely. Well, I think it's great. Go to get it on Amazon. Choosing Bankruptcy is the book. Luke Homen is the guy who wrote it. Luke, thanks for taking time. Thanks for the
yeah.
service that you provide to people and the heart that you bring to it. It's easy to see that you actually love what you do.
Well, thank you so much. I
You're
appreciate it.
welcome, bud. Take care. Thanks for listening to Expert Speak. Tune in again next time for a great episode. Take care. God bless.